Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the heart of the Italian Renaissance. But we're not just here to marvel at beautiful paintings and sculptures. Instead, we're pulling back the gilded curtains on the disturbing truth behind the Medici's political power. Imagine yourself stepping into the sun-drenched, yet shadow-laden, streets of 14th century Florence. You're not just admiring the majestic Duomo, you're breathing in the heavy scent of ambition, feeling the intricate weave of silk and wool, and sensing the unspoken power that hums beneath the surface of a supposedly free republic. This isn't your usual art history class. This is a deep dive into the ruthless, often morally ambiguous, ascent of a family who built an empire, not on ancient titles, but on money, cunning, and a terrifying mastery of political manipulation. Seriously, if you were living in Florence back then, you'd quickly learn that while the city had elected officials. The real decisions were made in the opulent, private palaces of certain powerful bankers. Trust me, you probably wouldn't survive long if you crossed them without understanding how their system truly worked. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to 14th century Florence, a city-state that is a vibrant hub of commerce, innovation, and artistic genius. This isn't a kingdom with a king, it's a republic, theoretically governed by its citizens through various councils and elected officials. However, as you observe, the reality is far more complex. Power is fragmented, constantly shifting between powerful guilds and wealthy aristocratic families. Like the Albizzi and the Strozzi, the city is a crucible of intense competition, where economic rivalry often spills into brutal political feuds. Amidst this bustling, yet often volatile, environment, one family, seemingly of modest origins compared to the ancient nobility, begins its extraordinary rise. The Medici. They aren't warriors or landowners of vast ancestral estates. Their power stems from something far more modern, and, frankly, revolutionary for its time banking. You witness the early Medici, figures like Giovanni de' Medici, meticulously laying the groundwork for their immense fortune. He's not a flamboyant character, rather. He's shrewd, diligent, and incredibly astute with money. You see him managing accounts, extending loans across Europe, and developing innovative financial instruments that crisscross vast distances. The Medici Bank isn't just a local institution. It quickly becomes the most powerful financial institution of its era. With branches stretching from London to Venice, controlling the flow of commerce and capital for merchants, princes, and even the Pope, you feel the sheer scale of their wealth accumulating, a truly astonishing feat for a family with no traditional noble lineage. This accumulation of wealth is the bedrock of their political power, allowing them to quietly influence every aspect of Florentine life, without ever holding a sword. However, the rapid accumulation of such power and wealth inevitably breeds resentment and fear among Florence's established aristocratic families. The old money that looked down upon the Medici's new wealth. You hear the whispers of jealousy, the accusations of usury lending money with interest, which was frowned upon by the church and other morally ambiguous financial practices that fueled their fortunes. The Florentine political system, though republican in name, is a convoluted web of councils, elections, and ever-shifting alliances. You see how the Medici, through their vast financial resources, begin to subtly manipulate this system. They don't openly seize power or declare themselves rulers. Instead, they operate behind the scenes. They place their loyal clients and allies in key government positions, ensure that elected officials are sympathetic to their interests, and discreetly influence voting outcomes. This is the disturbing truth of their early political power, their mastery of soft power, influencing without overtly ruling, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, ensuring that decisions, while appearing democratic, always align with Medici interests. It's like watching a grand game of political chess where they control every piece, even if their king isn't on the board, a particularly crucial and often morally ambiguous aspect of their banking empire involves their dealings with the papacy. The Medici become the primary bankers to the Pope, managing the immense revenues of the Catholic Church. You see the vast sums of money flowing into Rome from across Christendom, from tithes, indulgences, and donations. The Medici handle everything from collecting these revenues to funding papal wars, artistic commissions, and the lavish lifestyles of popes. This position gives them not just enormous profit, but unprecedented leverage and influence over the most powerful religious institution in Europe. You witness the symbiotic, yet deeply corrupting, relationship between sacred authority and profane wealth. This financial entanglement with the church allowed them to gain a unique foothold in a world where spiritual and temporal power were inextricably linked. Giving them an almost untouchable status, historians still debate the extent to which the Medici's influence over the papacy genuinely corrupted the church's spiritual mission, or merely reflected and exacerbated existing systemic issues within the institution itself. Regardless, it profoundly shaped their ascent. The family's rise isn't without its direct confrontations. You witness the constant plotting and counterplotting within Florence. The other powerful families, like the Albizzi and the Pazzi, deeply resent the Medici's growing dominance and frequently attempt to undermine them. You feel the simmering hatred, the desperate ambition that drives them to consider drastic measures. Political rivalries often spill over into public street brawls and even odds occasionally, assassinations. The stakes are incredibly high. Failure in these power struggles means not just loss of influence, but often exile, confiscation of property, or worse, a quick, brutal end. In 1433, you observe a particularly dramatic moment. Cosimo de' Medici, the elder Giovanni, di Bicci's son and true architect of their political power, is briefly exiled by the Albizzi family, who fear his increasing influence. You feel the collective gasp of the Florentine elite as the man who effectively controlled the city is removed. However, Cosimo's vast financial leverage over the city, his network of indebted clients, and, crucially, his immense popularity among the common people lead to a swift reversal of fortunes. Within a year, he is triumphantly recalled to Florence, and the Albizzi are themselves exiled. You see the powerful demonstration of Medici political power, not just in their wealth, but in their surprising popular support among the working classes. Who benefited from their civic patronage and the relative stability they brought? It's a powerful lesson in political resilience and the strength of public opinion. Even if carefully cultivated, the Medici also understood that power wasn't just about money or manipulation. It was about public perception and legitimacy. You witness them investing heavily in art and architecture, a strategy that serves multiple purposes. They commission magnificent palaces, churches, and public works from the greatest artists and architects of the Renaissance, including Brunelleschi, Donatello, and later, Michelangelo. This isn't just about cultural appreciation. It's a calculated display of their immense wealth, their sophisticated taste, and their commitment to civic improvement. These artistic endeavors transform Florence into a beacon of the Renaissance, attracting talent and showcasing Medici dominance, subtly imprinting their name onto the very fabric of the city. This patronage also provides employment for thousands of artisans and laborers, further cementing their popularity and making them seem like benevolent patrons rather than hidden rulers. An intriguing yet often overlooked detail of their early banking success is their innovative use of the bill of exchange. This sophisticated financial instrument allowed merchants to transfer funds across vast distances without physically moving large sums of gold or silver, greatly reducing the risk of theft and making international trade far more efficient. The Medici pioneered its widespread use, effectively creating a sophisticated international financial system that propelled their wealth and influence. Establishing the groundwork for modern banking practices, by the mid-15th century, the Medici are undeniably the de facto rulers of Florence, even without holding official titles. You observe Cosimo de' Medici, who famously states, "50 years in the city, never out of my house. Yet I am feared and respected by all." He governs through a complex web of patronage, strategic alliances, and occasional, subtle coercion. He ensures that key public offices are held by his loyal followers, and he lends money to influential citizens, creating a vast web of financial dependency that extends throughout the city's elite. You feel the insidious grip of their control, a system that maintains the illusion of a republic while exercising absolute political power behind the scenes. Often through fear and obligation rather than overt decree, the disturbing truth behind the Medici's political power is that their immense wealth, while fueling the unparalleled artistic and intellectual flourishing of the Renaissance, was simultaneously built on a foundation of systematic political manipulation, astute financial dealings that pushed ethical boundaries, and a ruthless, albeit often subtle, suppression of any true opposition. They redefined power, demonstrating how financial might and cunning political strategy could exert absolute control over a supposedly free republic. This laid the groundwork for future generations to wield even more explicit and, as you will soon discover, even more violent power, ultimately transforming the very nature of Florentine governance forever. You now shift your focus to Cosimo de' Medici the Elder, the undisputed architect of the family's clandestine power, and immediately you sense the profound difference between overt rule and subtle manipulation. Having returned from his brief exile, Cosimo doesn't simply reclaim his position, he solidifies the family's control over Florence in a way that is both absolute and, on the surface, entirely democratic. You feel the deceptive calm that settles over the city, a quiet understanding that while the forms of the Republic remain, the substance of power now resides firmly with the Medici. Cosimo is a master of what we might call invisible governance. You observe him, not from a throne, but from his counting house, or from the private studies of his magnificent palaces. He never holds the official title of Lord of Florence or Duke. He prefers to remain a private citizen. Yet, every significant decision in the city, from major public works to the appointment of key officials, passes through him. You see how he uses his vast personal wealth to great effect. He lends money to struggling merchants and artisans, ensuring their loyalty. He generously funds public building projects, churches, libraries, hospitals that benefit the common people, earning him immense popularity and the affectionate title Pater Patriae, Father of the Country, bestowed upon him posthumously. This isn't just philanthropy, it's a shrewd investment in public opinion, a form of soft power that makes him indispensable to the city. It's like watching a grand maestro conduct an orchestra from the back row, making everyone believe they're playing their own tune. The disturbing truth of Cosimo's political power lies in his systematic, almost surgical, manipulation of Florence's republican institutions. You witness how he controls elections without appearing to do so. He ensures that only candidates loyal to the Medici are selected for important public offices through a system of scrutiny, where names were drawn from lists that had been carefully vetted for Medici loyalists. He also uses a practice called accoppiatori, special committees appointed to control the electoral process. You feel the subtle tightening of the noose around Florentine democracy, a gradual erosion of true republican ideals, while citizens still vote. The choices presented to them are almost invariably curated by Cosimo and his inner circle. This isn't tyranny by force, but by insidious influence, making it incredibly difficult to pinpoint where true power lies and how to challenge it. You observe the fate of those who dare to oppose him. While Cosimo is generally less prone to public executions than later rulers, his method of dealing with rivals is equally chilling. Opponents are systematically ruined, their businesses subtly undermined, their political careers ended, or they are forced into exile. You feel the pervasive atmosphere of fear. The understanding that challenging the Medici means certain economic and social ruin. Even if your life is spared, this silent form of oppression is arguably more effective, as it leaves no martyrs, only broken men fading into obscurity. It's a very clever way to silence dissent without making a public spectacle, like watching a slow, quiet draining of someone's lifeblood. The Medici Bank, under Cosimo's shrewd management, reaches its zenith during this period. You see it as the central nervous system of European finance. With branches stretching across the continent, the bank handles not just commercial loans, but also acts as the official banker for the Pope. Managing the immense revenues of the Catholic Church, this relationship with the papacy is a crucial, yet deeply compromising, aspect of their power. You witness the enormous financial leverage this gives Cosimo over the Church, allowing him to influence papal elections and secure lucrative appointments for his allies, and even for his own family members. Historians still debate the precise balance between Cosimo's genuine piety and his pragmatic use of the Church for political and financial gain. The line between holy patronage and blatant corruption often seems blurry in their dealings. Cosimo also understood the power of cultural patronage. You see him pouring immense wealth into sponsoring artists, philosophers, and architects who would define the Renaissance. Brunelleschi's magnificent dome on Florence Cathedral, Donatello's groundbreaking sculptures, Fra Angelico's serene frescoes, all are realized with Medici money. This isn't just about love of art, it's a sophisticated form of public relations, associating the Medici name with beauty, innovation, and intellectual flourishing. You stroll through Florence, marveling at the sheer artistic genius on display, knowing that much of it was directly funded by the man who effectively, though unofficially, ruled the city. It makes you wonder how much art history we appreciate today might have been funded by questionable means, an intriguing, yet often overlooked detail of Cosimo's cunning is his strategic use of dowries in marriages. He meticulously arranged marriages for his children and grandchildren, not always for love, but to forge alliances with other powerful Florentine families and even with European royalty. These matrimonial bonds created intricate networks of loyalty and obligation, further cementing the Medici's influence across social strata and national borders. It's like watching a grand, complex family tree being built, where every branch serves a specific political purpose. You observe Cosimo's relationship with the common Florentine citizens. While he crushed the political elite who opposed him, he often fostered a surprising level of popularity among the lower and middle classes. He was known for his approachable demeanor, his willingness to listen to petitions, and his occasional acts of personal charity. This carefully cultivated image, combined with the employment opportunities provided by his bank and his civic projects, created a loyal base of support that acted as a crucial counterweight to the resentment of the old aristocracy. By the time of Cosimo de' Medici's death in 1464, he has truly established the Medici as the undisputed, albeit unofficial, rulers of Florence. He has taken the family from wealthy bankers to the de facto masters of a powerful city-state, all while maintaining the illusion of a republic. You feel the legacy he leaves behind a period of relative peace and prosperity for Florence, but one built on the chilling foundations of manipulated democracy, silenced opposition, and an insidious concentration of power. His children and grandchildren will inherit this carefully constructed edifice of hidden power. But they will also face new, more volatile challenges. as the resentments he suppressed quietly begin to simmer. Threatening to erupt into horrifying public acts of defiance and bloodshed, you now transition into a much darker, more volatile chapter of Medici history, as the subtle, almost invisible. Political control exercised by Cosimo the Elder gives way to the more public and charismatic, yet equally ruthless, leadership of his grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici. When Cosimo dies in 1464, his son Piero de' Medici briefly takes the reins. A man whose ill health makes him a less imposing figure. You feel the tremor of anxiety among the Florentine elite. Sensing a potential power vacuum, however, upon Piero's death in 1469, his sons, Lorenzo and Giuliano, step forward, inheriting the vast Medici network and its precarious hold on power. You witness Lorenzo the Magnificent, a figure who will come to embody the very spirit of the Renaissance. He is brilliant, charming, a prodigious poet, a skilled diplomat, and an unparalleled patron of the arts. You see him surrounded by the greatest minds and artists of his time: Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, all flourishing under his generous patronage. He funds academies, collects rare manuscripts, and throws extravagant festivals that dazzle the Florentine populace. He makes Florence glow with an unmatched cultural brilliance, earning him the moniker the Magnificent. You feel the exhilarating energy of this cultural golden age. Knowing that much of it is fueled by Medici ambition and wealth, it's like being at the center of the greatest party, surrounded by geniuses and beauty. However, beneath this glittering facade of cultural splendor lies the same disturbing reality of Medici political power. It is unofficial, constantly challenged, and maintained through cunning, patronage, and ultimately, ruthless force. Lorenzo, like his grandfather, holds no official title. He is merely a private citizen. Yet, he rules Florence with an iron fist, controlling the city's councils, its electoral processes, and its key institutions. You observe his deft diplomatic skills, balancing the volatile alliances between the Italian city-states, Venice, Milan, Naples, and the Papal States, navigating a treacherous political landscape that constantly threatens to erupt into war. He establishes Florentine dominance without ever formally declaring himself a prince, maintaining the illusion of a republic. This very power, however, breeds deep-seated resentment among other powerful Florentine families, who chafe under Medici dominance and yearn for a return to a truly republican system. The most prominent of these rival families are the Pazzi, a wealthy banking family with extensive connections, including with the papacy. They deeply resent the Medici's monopoly on power and believe they can, and should, overthrow them. You feel the simmering hatred, the desperate ambition that drives them to consider the unthinkable assassination. This simmering resentment explodes into the horrifying event known as the Pazzi Conspiracy in 1478. You are there, witnessing the meticulously planned, yet ultimately botched, attempt to assassinate Lorenzo and his younger brother, Giuliano de' Medici. The plot is audacious, hatched by the Pazzi family with the support of Archbishop Francesco Salviati of Pisa, and, most chillingly, with the tacit approval of Pope Sixtus IV. The Pope, a fierce enemy of the Medici who resented their financial leverage and their influence over Florence, secretly hoped their removal would allow him to assert greater control over the city. This revelation is a disturbing truth in itself. The head of the Catholic Church involved in a murder plot against a powerful family to secure political gain. The assassination attempt takes place on Easter Sunday. During High Mass in Florence Cathedral, you feel the sacred solemnity of the moment, sharply contrasted by the sudden, shocking eruption of violence. As the host is raised, the conspirators strike. You witness the brutal attack. Giuliano de' Medici is viciously stabbed repeatedly, dying instantly on the cathedral floor, his body riddled with wounds. Lorenzo, however, manages to defend himself, drawing his sword and fighting back, bravely aided by friends and loyalists. He is wounded in the neck but escapes into the sacristy, where he bars the doors, saving his life. It's a moment of sheer, unexpected terror in a holy place, like a horror movie scene unfolding in a serene sanctuary, shattering the peace with brutal force. The immediate aftermath is a horrifying spectacle of swift, brutal retribution. You see the enraged Florentine populace, who largely side with the Medici, turn on the conspirators. The city erupts into chaos and bloody reprisals. Archbishop Salviati, still clad in his ecclesiastical robes, is hanged from the windows of the Palazzo della Signoria. Florence's town hall, by the furious mob. Other conspirators are hunted down and lynched in the streets, often with horrific violence. You feel the raw, visceral anger of the mob, the absolute savagery of their vengeance. The bodies of the Pazzi family members and their allies swing from the palace windows, a grotesque warning to any who might dare to challenge the Medici. This public display of vengeance, though horrifying, firmly solidifies Lorenzo's popular support and consolidates his power even further. As the city rallies around him as its defender, the disturbing truth of the Pazzi conspiracy is not just the murder attempt itself, but the chilling realization of the lengths to which rivals, even the Pope, would go to eliminate the Medici, and the equally ruthless speed with which the Medici family and their supporters would retaliate. This event underscores the fact that the Renaissance, for all its beauty and enlightenment, was a time of extreme political danger and casual, public violence. It demonstrated that political power in Florence was literally a matter of life and death, and that the Medici, when threatened, were as brutal as any despotic ruler. Historians still debate whether the scale of the Florentine retaliation was an act of spontaneous popular rage, or carefully orchestrated by Lorenzo to eliminate his remaining rivals and consolidate his political power even further. The outcome was undeniably beneficial to him. Cementing his de facto rule, the Pazzi conspiracy sparks a 2-year war between Florence and the Papal States. Allied with the Kingdom of Naples, you witness Lorenzo's diplomatic genius shine during this conflict. Facing overwhelming odds and excommunication from the Pope, a serious blow for any Catholic ruler. Lorenzo embarks on a daring, secret mission to Naples. He bravely places himself in the hands of his enemy, King Ferrante the Furnier, known for his cruelty, and through personal charm and brilliant negotiation, manages to secure a separate peace, breaking the papal alliance and saving Florence from imminent destruction. You feel the immense relief throughout Florence as the war concludes, a testament to Lorenzo's statesmanship and his willingness to take extraordinary risks for his city. This diplomatic triumph further enhances his legend as the Magnificent after the Pazzi conspiracy. Lorenzo the Magnificent's political power in Florence becomes almost unassailable. You observe him ruling with a more overt hand, though still maintaining the Republican facade. He meticulously controls elections, fills key offices with his loyalists, and uses his vast network of spies to root out any potential dissent. His cultural patronage reaches new heights, truly making Florence the epicenter of the Renaissance. But this cultural brilliance is now inextricably linked to a strong, centralized political authority. He fosters the careers of young artists like Michelangelo, seeing their genius and providing them with the resources to flourish, simultaneously reflecting glory back onto the Medici name. He also establishes a network of diplomatic relations that ensures Florence's stability and influence on the wider Italian stage. Acting as a crucial mediator among the often warring Italian city-states, an intriguing, yet often overlooked detail of Lorenzo's rule is his personal transformation after the Pazzi conspiracy. The assassination attempt made him more cynical, more cautious, and arguably more ruthless. He became less willing to delegate power and more determined to control every aspect of Florentine life. Solidifying a de facto tyranny under the guise of enlightened leadership, it's almost as if the trauma of the event hardened him, making him fully embrace the darker aspects of power necessary for survival in that treacherous era, and ensuring his family's continued dominance. By the time of his death in 1492, Lorenzo leaves behind a Florence at the peak of its cultural and political influence. A city that truly is a jewel of the Renaissance, however, he also leaves a city whose republican institutions are hollowed out, its power concentrated almost entirely in the hands of one family. The disturbing truth of his magnificent reign is that the dazzling artistic and intellectual flourishing was inextricably linked to a ruthless political system, one that crushed opposition and wielded immense, often unseen, power to secure the Medici's unofficial, but absolute control. He ensured the Medici's continued dominance, but his death would open a brief, terrifying vacuum that would unleash a new, fanatical force upon Florence, threatening to undo everything the Medici had built and temporarily sweep them from power. You now enter a period of profound upheaval in Florence, a stark and chilling contrast to the dazzling, yet subtly controlled, era of Lorenzo the Magnificent. His death in 1492 leaves a dangerous power vacuum, and his successor, his son Piero de' Medici, proves to be utterly ill-suited to the cunning and ruthless politics that had defined his family's rise. You feel the tremor of instability, the sense that the carefully constructed Medici edifice is about to crumble, and a new, terrifying force is about to sweep through Florence. Piero de' Medici, often nicknamed the Unfortunate, lacks his father's charisma, intelligence, and diplomatic skill. You observe his arrogance and his poor judgment, particularly in foreign policy. When King Charles VIII of France invades Italy in 1494, Piero attempts to appease him by making humiliating concessions, effectively surrendering Florentine territory without a fight. You feel the outrage of the Florentine citizens, their national pride deeply wounded by his perceived cowardice and incompetence. This colossal misstep instantly erodes the Medici's popular support, which had been so carefully cultivated by Cosimo and Lorenzo. It's like watching a clumsy actor trying to play a role perfectly suited for a master, and failing spectacularly. This moment of weakness allows a fiery, charismatic figure to rise from the ranks of the religious Girolamo Savonarola. You witness his dramatic emergence from the Dominican monastery of San Marco. Savonarola is a friar, a preacher, but unlike the cultured humanist scholars favored by the Medici, he is a fundamentalist, a prophet of doom. He rails against the corruption of the church, the moral decay of Florence, and, most vehemently, against the decadent, pagan influence of the Renaissance itself. You hear his thundering sermons in Florence Cathedral, condemning luxury, gambling, homosexuality, and the tyranny of the Medici. He preaches of divine retribution, of a coming apocalypse if Florence does not repent and purify itself. You feel the electrifying power of his oratory, captivating the Florentine populace, especially the lower classes, who are weary of political corruption and economic hardship. As the French invasion looms and popular discontent with Piero de' Medici reaches a fever pitch, Savonarola steps into the political vacuum. You observe his astonishing ascent to unofficial leadership. He doesn't hold political office, but his moral authority becomes absolute. He preaches of a new, purified Florentine republic, a theocratic state dedicated to God, with Christ as its true king. In November 1494, the Florentine citizens, emboldened by Savonarola's pronouncements and disgusted with Piero, rise up. You see Piero de' Medici and his family ignominiously expelled from Florence, fleeing for their lives, their centuries of painstaking power building undone in a matter of days. The Medici palace, once a symbol of their dominance, is ransacked by the angry mob. It's a stunning reversal of fortune. A humbling fall from grace for the proud family. Savonarola's rule over Florence is a period of intense religious fervor and chilling puritanism. You witness the infamous bonfires of the vanities, encouraged by Savonarola's impassioned sermons. Citizens bring their vanities, luxury goods, gambling equipment, scandalous artworks, classical texts, fashionable clothes, mirrors, musical instruments, and even books of pagan poetry to the Piazza della Signoria, where they are piled high and set ablaze. You feel the chilling fanaticism of these events, the destruction of beautiful and valuable objects in the name of piety. Artists like Botticelli reportedly throw some of their own works into the flames. It's a terrifying spectacle of collective self-denial and religious extremism, like watching an entire city embrace a severe, joyless existence, believing it will bring them closer to God. The disturbing truth of Savonarola's political power is the suppression of individual expression and intellectual freedom that had been the hallmark of the Renaissance. He sought to create a new Jerusalem in Florence, but at the cost of the very vibrancy and humanism that the Medici had so passionately fostered. You feel the heavy hand of his moral policing, the fear of speaking out against his rigid doctrines. Public confessionals are set up, and informants are encouraged to report on neighbors. This period represents a stark repudiation of the secular humanism that characterized the High Renaissance, dragging Florence back into what some would consider a form of medieval asceticism, Savonarola's puritanical rule, however, soon begins to alienate even some of his initial supporters. You observe the growing discontent, particularly among the wealthy merchants and artisans who suffer from the downturn in trade caused by the focus on spiritual rather than commercial matters. His unyielding stance against Pope Alexander VI, Borgia Pope, known for his corruption, whom Savonarola vehemently condemned, also creates powerful enemies. The Pope, tired of being publicly attacked by a mere friar, excommunicates Savonarola, a severe blow to his spiritual authority and a clear signal that his political power was now under direct assault. An intriguing, yet often overlooked, detail about Savonarola is his prophetic, almost apocalyptic, style of preaching. He spoke of visions and divine messages, truly believing he was God's instrument to cleanse Florence. This fervent belief resonated deeply with a population experiencing plague, famine, and political instability, making his message particularly potent at that precise moment in history. His strength lay not in traditional political strategy, but in spiritual conviction, which, once it faltered, left him terribly vulnerable. Historians still debate whether Savonarola was a true prophet or a charismatic manipulator, but his profound impact on Florence is undeniable. The tide begins to turn against Savonarola. You witness his once adoring populace grow weary of his austerity, his endless denunciations, and his increasingly impossible demands. The Florentine government, no longer fearful of the exiled Medici, asserts its authority. In 1498, after a series of increasingly bizarre events, including a botched trial by fire to prove his divine favor, Savonarola loses public support. He is arrested. Along with two of his closest friars, you are present for the chilling final act of Savonarola's life. He is tortured on the rack, forced to confess to heresy and sedition. While under torture, he recants his confessions, but they are recorded regardless. On May 23, 1498, you witnessed Girolamo Savonarola, the man who had briefly ruled Florence through moral authority, being publicly hanged and then burned in the Piazza della Signoria, on the very spot where his bonfires of the vanities had consumed so much art and beauty. His ashes are then thrown into the Arno River to prevent any relics from being collected by his remaining followers. It's a grim, ironic end for a man who had sought to purify a city through fire, only to be consumed by it himself. The fall of Savonarola leaves Florence once again in a state of political flux. But the Medici are still in exile. The city attempts to re-establish a true republic, free from the overt or subtle control of powerful families. However, you sense that this period of true republicanism will be short-lived. The Pazzi conspiracy and Savonarola's purges have demonstrated the deep instability that lies beneath the surface of Florentine politics. A volatility that the Medici, despite their flaws, had largely managed to contain. The disturbing truth of Savonarola's rise and fall is the fragility of public sentiment and the dangers of extreme religious zeal when combined with political power. He temporarily overthrew one of the most powerful families in Europe, not with an army, but with words and an appeal to divine judgment. Yet, his rigid moral code and his inability to compromise ultimately led to his own fiery demise. His brief reign is a stark reminder that even a golden age can be plunged into darkness by the forces of fundamentalism, and that the path to secular humanism was anything but linear or peaceful. The stage is now set for the Medici, having learned bitter lessons from their exile, to begin their ruthless campaign to reclaim their lost dominion. You now witness the relentless and often brutal campaign of the Medici family to reclaim their lost political power in Florence, having been ignominiously expelled. They spend years in exile, biding their time, forging new alliances, and learning bitter lessons from their downfall. You feel the simmering resentment and determined ambition that drives them, a powerful force that will eventually allow them to seize control once more. But this time, with even greater, more overt authority. This is the disturbing truth of their political resilience. They learned that subtle influence, while powerful, was not enough to guarantee their rule. The years immediately following Savonarola's demise see Florence attempt to re-establish a genuine republic. You observe the city's efforts to govern itself, a period often characterized by political instability and a lack of strong, unified leadership. The absence of the Medici's subtle hand creates a vacuum that no single faction can consistently fill. This instability, ironically, plays directly into the Medici's hands, as it underscores the perceived need for their decisive, even if autocratic, leadership. It's like watching a group of musicians trying to play a symphony without a conductor. There are many talented individuals, but no one to truly lead the melody. Leaving the music chaotic and uninspired, the Medici family, particularly Giovanni de' Medici Lorenzo the Magnificent's second son and his younger brother Giuliano, become shrewd operators in the wider Italian political landscape during their exile. Giovanni enters the church, a strategic move that allows him to build powerful connections and amass influence within the Papal States. You see him rise through the ecclesiastical ranks, using his family's vast wealth and diplomatic acumen to his advantage. This is a crucial, yet often overlooked, aspect of their return. They don't just rely on military might, they leverage the vast, sometimes corrupt, power of the church by becoming a cardinal. Giovanni strategically positions himself to eventually contend for the ultimate prize, the papacy itself. Their opportunity to return to Florence finally comes with the shifting tides of European power. You witness the formation of the Holy League in 1511, an alliance forged by Pope Julius II. Spain and other European powers, primarily aimed at curbing French influence in Italy. The Medici aligned themselves firmly with the Pope in Spain. Recognizing this as their best chance, you feel the immense strategic significance of this alliance, as it provides them with the powerful military backing they need to force their way back into Florence. In 1512, the combined forces of the Holy League march on Florence. You observe the city's valiant, but ultimately futile attempts to defend itself. The Medici, now backed by foreign armies, are no longer content with subtle influence. They demand their full restoration, not as citizens, but as rulers. Florence, exhausted and outmatched, eventually capitulates. You see the Medici family, led by Giovanni and Giuliano, make their triumphant, yet ominous, return to the city. This isn't a return as humble citizens, it's a return as conquerors, signaling a fundamental shift in their relationship with Florence. Their political power is now enforced by external military might, not just internal manipulation. The disturbing truth of their return is the brutal suppression of any lingering Republican sentiment. The Medici, having learned from their previous exile, are now determined to completely dismantle the Republican institutions that had allowed them to be expelled. You witness the systematic purge of their enemies, the imprisonment and execution of leading Republican figures, and the manipulation of elections to ensure their absolute control. The illusion of a republic is largely abandoned, replaced by a more overt, authoritarian rule. This return is less about reconciliation and more about retribution, ensuring that no future popular uprising can dislodge them. It's like watching a defeated chess player return to the board, not to finish the game, but to flip the table and set new rules, enforcing them with a literal army. Giovanni de' Medici's ascent continues when, in 1513, he is elected pope, taking the name Leo XII. You feel the seismic shift this creates. For the first time, a Medici sits on the throne of St. Peter, holding immense spiritual and temporal power. This is a monumental achievement for a banking family, a testament to their ambition and strategic brilliance. You see him, lavishly dressed, ruling from the Vatican, using the vast resources of the papacy to consolidate his family's power back in Florence and to further their political ambitions across Italy. He funnels church funds to his relatives, appoints Medici family members to high ecclesiastical offices, and uses papal authority to crush any threats to Florentine Medici rule. He even excommunicates his enemies, a powerful spiritual weapon wielded for temporal gain. The papacy under Leo XI becomes almost an extension of the Medici family's secular power. You observe the blurring of lines between sacred and profane. As the Pope acts more like a Renaissance prince than a spiritual leader, he is a passionate patron of the arts, famously commissioning works from Raphael and the continued work on St. Peter's Basilica, which, ironically, leads to the widespread sale of indulgences, a key trigger for the Protestant Reformation. You feel the opulence and decadence of the Vatican court under Leo VI, a reflection of the Medici's love for luxury and their comfortable blending of the sacred with the secular, further cementing their controversial political power. Meanwhile, in Florence, Leo X places his younger brother, Giuliano de' Medici, and later his nephew, Lorenzo II de' Medici, son of Piero the Unfortunate, in charge of the city, while still technically a republic. These Medici figures rule as de facto lords. You witness their efforts to solidify their authority, often employing ruthless tactics to quash dissent. They manipulate the city's constitution to their advantage, ensuring that their family members hold all the real power. The old republican spirit of Florence is systematically extinguished under their heavy hand, replaced by a more explicit Medici tyranny, an intriguing, yet often overlooked detail of this period is the brief, yet significant, moment when Niccolò Machiavelli interacts with the Medici. After their return in 1512, Machiavelli, a prominent Republican official who had served the Florentine Republic, is tortured and exiled. During his exile, he writes The Prince, a chillingly pragmatic treatise on how a ruler can acquire and maintain power, often through ruthless means. It's a disturbing truth that Machiavelli, who despised the Medici's tyranny, created a manual of power that would become synonymous with their cunning and amorality, even dedicating it to Lorenzo de' Medici in a desperate bid to return to favor. Historians still debate whether the prince was a cynical endorsement of ruthless power, a satirical warning against it, or a desperate plea for a strong leader to unify Italy. But its direct inspiration from Medici methods is undeniable. The Medici's re-establishment of political power is a testament to their resilience, their vast wealth, and their strategic use of both political and spiritual authority. they learned that subtle influence, while effective for Cosimo the Elder, was not enough to prevent outright expulsion. Their return is characterized by a new, more explicit determination to solidify their control, paving the way for the eventual transformation of Florence from a republic into a ducal state. The disturbing truth of this period is not just the individual acts of cruelty, but the systematic dismantling of a cherished republican ideal and its replacement with a dynastic tyranny, all under the guise of restoring order and stability to a turbulent city. The stage is now set for future generations of Medici to wield even more overt power, ultimately culminating in the official establishment of a hereditary dukedom. Marking the complete subjugation of Florence, you now witness the remarkable, yet often disquieting, ascent of the Medici family to the very pinnacle of the Catholic Church. A strategic move that solidified their political power and extended their influence far beyond the borders of Florence. This isn't just about controlling a city-state, it's about wielding immense spiritual and temporal authority, often blurring the lines between piety and ruthless political ambition. You feel the profound impact of two prominent Medici figures ascending to the papacy, transforming the Vatican into an extension of their family's agenda, marking a disturbing truth about the nature of power in Renaissance Europe. The first Medici Pope, as you recall, is Giovanni de' Medici, who became Pope Leo X in 1513. You see him, a man born into immense wealth and privilege, educated in the finest humanist traditions of the Renaissance, now occupying the holiest office in Christendom. His papacy is characterized by incredible extravagance, a passionate love for the arts, and an insatiable desire to enhance the prestige and political power of his family. He famously declared, "Since God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it." You feel the almost reckless abandon of his spending, commissioning grand artworks from masters like Raphael and Michelangelo, staging lavish banquets, and funding ambitious building projects. Most notably the continued construction of St. Peter's Basilica. This enormous expense, as you might recall, leads directly to the widespread sale of indulgences, a key trigger for Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. A decision with profound and unintended consequences for the spiritual unity of Europe. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game where the Pope is constantly raising the bets. Using spiritual capital for earthly political gain, Pope Leo X's papacy is a disturbing truth in itself, for many. You observe his blatant nepotism, appointing numerous Medici relatives and loyalists to high-ranking positions within the church. His cousin Giulio de' Medici, who you will meet again soon, becomes a cardinal and one of his most trusted advisors, effectively managing the family's interests both within the Vatican and back in Florence. Other relatives received lucrative bishoprics and benefices, ensuring a vast network of Medici loyalists within the church hierarchy. You see the vast wealth of the church being funneled into Medici hands, enriching the family and consolidating their political power base. This wasn't just common practice for the era. It was an extreme manifestation of how secular ambitions could corrupt sacred offices, leading to a profound erosion of spiritual authority. Historians still debate whether Leo X's focus on worldly affairs and his lavish spending genuinely undermined the spiritual authority of the papacy to an irreparable degree, or if the seeds of the Reformation were already so deeply sown that even a more pious pope couldn't have prevented it. The second Medici pope you encounter is Giulio de' Medici, the illegitimate son of Lorenzo the Magnificent's brother Giuliano, who was murdered in the Pazzi conspiracy. Remember, you observe his rise through the church hierarchy, carefully guided by his cousin Leo X. Upon Leo X's death in 1521, and after a brief interregnum, Giulio is elected pope in 1523, taking the name Clement VII. You feel the deep sense of satisfaction within the Medici family at this astonishing achievement: 2 popes in less than a decade, cementing their control over the papacy for an extended period. This uninterrupted papal influence provides an unparalleled political platform for the family, Pope Clement VII's papacy is marked by profound political instability and the escalating crisis of the Reformation. You see him struggling to navigate the complex web of European politics, caught between the powerful Holy Roman Emperor Charles V and King Francis I of France. His indecisiveness and shifting alliances lead to disastrous consequences for both the papacy and Florence. You feel the immense pressure on him, as he tries to maintain a delicate balance of power while simultaneously ensuring the Medici's political dominance in Florence. He is a more cautious and less flamboyant figure than Leo X, but equally driven by family ambition. The most catastrophic event of Clement VII's reign is the sack of Rome in 1527. You witness the horrific spectacle as mutinous imperial troops, unpaid and out of control, storm and plunder the eternal city. Churches are desecrated, palaces are looted, and thousands are massacred. The Pope himself is forced to seek refuge in the Castel San Angelo, a humiliating siege that severely diminishes papal prestige and authority across Christendom. You feel the shockwaves of this event reverberate across Europe, a brutal testament to the vulnerability of even the highest spiritual office when caught in the crossfire of secular power struggles. It's like watching the holiest city on earth become a playground for enraged, uncontrolled mercenaries, a truly terrifying symbol of chaos. This humiliation of the Pope has direct consequences for Florence. You observe the Florentines, seizing the opportunity presented by the Pope's weakness, rise up once again against Medici rule, expelling the family for a second time. This brief return to republicanism, however, is short-lived. Clement VIII, desperate to restore his family to power in Florence and rebuild his own authority, enters into a powerful alliance with Charles V, who had sacked Rome. As part of this pragmatic, almost cynical, agreement, the emperor agrees to help restore the Medici. You see the overwhelming might of the imperial and papal forces besieging Florence. The siege of Florence in 1529 to 1530 is a brutal affair. You feel the desperation of the Florentine citizens, bravely resisting for months, enduring famine and hardship. But ultimately, the city is forced to surrender. You witness the return of the Medici, not as favored citizens, but as ruthless conquerors, backed by foreign armies. This return is even more definitive and brutal than the last. Clement VII, learning from past mistakes, is determined to permanently end Florence's republican pretensions and secure his family's political rule once and for all. The disturbing truth of the Medici popes is their willingness to overtly use the spiritual power of the papacy for the material and political gain of their family. They appointed relatives to high offices, funneled church wealth into secular projects, and even commanded armies to enforce their family's dominance in Florence. This blatant disregard for the spiritual purity of their office, and their deep entanglement in secular power politics, contributed significantly to the growing disillusionment with the Catholic Church, further fueling the Protestant Reformation and fundamentally altering the religious landscape of Europe. It's almost as if the line between the sacred and the profane had completely dissolved, with the papal tiara serving as just another crown in a ruthless political game. An intriguing, yet often overlooked, detail of Clement VII's papacy is his pivotal role in Henry VIII's great matter in England. You recall that Clement VII's indecisiveness and his virtual captivity after the sack of Rome directly prevented him from granting Henry VIII an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. This refusal ultimately led to the English Reformation and England's definitive break from Rome. It's a fascinating historical butterfly effect, where the Medici Pope's political predicament in Italy indirectly shaped the religious and political landscape of an entire nation across the sea after the final restoration of the Medici in Florence. Clement VII takes a decisive step to ensure their permanent political rule. He appoints his illegitimate son, Alessandro de' Medici, as the first Duke of Florence. You witness the official end of the Florentine Republic, replaced by a hereditary monarchy, a dramatic transformation for a city that had prided itself on its republican ideals for centuries. This is the culmination of generations of Medici ambition, moving from bankers to unofficial rulers and finally to crowned heads of state. Marking the absolute triumph of their political power, the Medici popes secured their family's political dominance through a powerful combination of religious authority, cunning political maneuvering, and overwhelming military force. Their reigns epitomize the blend of Renaissance grandeur and moral ambiguity that characterized the era. They built magnificent structures, patronized legendary artists, and navigated the treacherous waters of European politics, but often at the cost of the Church's spiritual integrity and Florence's republican freedoms. Their legacy is one of astounding achievement intertwined with undeniable corruption, forever cementing their place as figures of both awe and profound moral questioning regarding the true nature of power. You now embark on a journey that takes you far from the sun-drenched streets of Florence to the opulent, yet treacherous, courts of France. Here, a Medici woman, a direct descendant of Lorenzo the Magnificent, will rise to unprecedented political power, wielding it with a ruthless cunning that rivals, and perhaps even surpasses, that of her ancestors. You are about to witness the horrifying machinations of Catherine de' Medici, a queen mother, and ultimately a formidable regent who would shape the destiny of France for decades amidst a period of extreme religious and political turmoil. This is a disturbing truth for the male rulers of Europe, who consistently underestimated her formidable political acumen. Catherine de' Medici's early life is fraught with tragedy and uncertainty. You see her born in Florence in 1519, orphaned within a month, and largely ignored by her powerful Medici relatives, including the two Medici popes, Leo X and Clement VII. She is initially a pawn in their political games, a quiet girl with a sharp mind who learns early the harsh lessons of survival in a world of cutthroat politics and constant betrayals. Her most significant stroke of luck comes when her uncle, Pope Clement VII, arranges her marriage in 1533 to Henri, the second son of King Francis I of France. You observe her arrival in France, a somewhat plain, unassuming girl from a family considered new money by the ancient European aristocracies. She is often overshadowed by the French court's opulence and its disdain for her merchant origins. Finding herself in a challenging, often isolating, environment, it's like watching a Cinderella story, but with a deeply unsettling political subtext. For years, Catherine endures a difficult existence at the French court. You see her struggle with her husband's blatant infidelity, particularly his lifelong devotion to his mistress, Diane de Poitiers. The greatest pressure on her, however, is her inability to produce a male heir for a decade after her marriage. You feel her profound anxiety, the echoes of Henry VIII's great matter ringing in your ears. Remember the Tudors, knowing that her worth, and perhaps her very life, depends on her fertility and her ability to secure the French succession when she finally begins to bear children. She produces 10 in quick succession, including 3 sons who would eventually become kings of France: Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. This prolific motherhood secures her position, but the scars of her early struggles undoubtedly shape her character, making her cautious, pragmatic, and incredibly determined. Her true ascent to political power begins upon the unexpected death of her husband, King Henry II, in a jousting accident in 1559. You witness the sudden void left by his death. Her eldest son, Francis II, is a frail, sickly teenager, already married to the formidable Mary, Queen of Scots, a future rival of Elizabeth II. Remember, real power during his brief reign falls to the powerful Guise family, Mary's uncles, who are ardent Catholics. Catherine, though Queen Mother, is initially sidelined. Given little political authority, you feel her frustration, her immense ambition simmering beneath the surface. As she observes the court politics from the periphery, learning, waiting, and planning, when Francis II dies after only 17 months on the throne. Catherine's second son, Charles IX, ascends at the age of 10. This is Catherine's moment. You see her seize the opportunity, asserting her right as regent for her young son. She finally steps into the center of French power, and her rule will define a turbulent period marked by devastating wars of religion between Catholics and Protestant Huguenots. You feel the immense weight of the crown on her shoulders, and the daunting challenge of governing a nation tearing itself apart. Caught in a seemingly endless cycle of violence fueled by religious zealotry. It's like taking over the helm of a sinking ship during a hurricane, with half the crew actively trying to sink it faster. Catherine's regency is a masterclass in Machiavellian politics. You observe her constant maneuvering, her efforts to maintain a delicate balance between the powerful Catholic Guise faction and the Protestant Bourbon and Condé families. She tries to pursue a policy of religious toleration, initially, to keep the peace and prevent the monarchy from being completely undermined by civil war. She even arranges the marriage of her daughter, Margot, to the Protestant Henry of Navarre, hoping to heal the religious divide through a strategic alliance. You see her pragmatic approach, prioritizing the stability and survival of the Valois monarchy above all else. Even traditional Catholic dogma. This is a disturbing truth, a Catholic queen, from a family with 2 popes, attempting to broker peace with Protestants for purely political gain. A pragmatic compromise that many found scandalous. Historians still debate whether Catherine de' Medici genuinely desired religious peace, or if her efforts were merely calculated tactics to prevent any single faction from gaining too much power and threatening the Valois monarchy. Ultimately aiming for absolute control. However, her efforts at peace ultimately unravel, leading to one of the most infamous and brutal events in French history, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. You are there, witnessing the horror unfold. Initially, the massacre begins with a targeted assassination attempt on Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, a prominent Huguenot leader, possibly ordered by Catherine herself, or at least orchestrated by her circle. Fearing his growing influence over her son, King Charles IX. But the assassination attempt fails, leaving Coligny wounded but alive. Fearing Protestant retaliation, and under intense pressure from the Catholic Guise faction and her son, King Charles IX, Catherine makes a catastrophic decision. You see her, consumed by fear and a desire to eliminate the Protestant leadership, give the order to execute prominent Huguenots who had gathered in Paris for the royal wedding. But the organized assassinations quickly spiral out of control. You feel the terrifying shift from targeted killings to a widespread, indiscriminate slaughter. The ringing of church bells in the pre-dawn hours signals the start of the massacre. Catholic mobs, incited by religious fervor and years of hatred, sweep through the streets of Paris, brutally murdering thousands of unarmed Protestant men, women, and children. You hear the screams, the sounds of doors being broken down, the chilling silence that follows the carnage. The streets run red with blood, and the Seine River is choked with bodies. It's a night of unimaginable terror and unbridled savagery, a stain on the history of France and on Catherine's legacy. The disturbing truth of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre is the apparent complicity of the crown in initiating such an atrocity, turning a calculated political purge into a horrifying religious slaughter. While Catherine's direct responsibility for the full extent of the massacre is still debated, her initial actions undeniably lit the fuse of widespread violence. She famously claimed she was merely acting to prevent a Protestant coup, but her actions unleashed a torrent of bloodshed that shocked Europe and stained her political reputation forever. After the massacre, Catherine continues to wield immense power. She sees her third son, Henry III, ascend to the throne after Charles IX's death. She continues to manipulate and scheme, balancing factions, arranging marriages for her children, and sometimes even using poison. A tool that earned her the chilling nickname, the Serpent Queen. You feel the pervasive paranoia of the French court, where loyalties are fluid and betrayal lurks around every corner. She is often accused of using Italian methods of intrigue and poisoning, learned from her Florentine heritage. Though concrete evidence is often elusive and heavily debated by historians, and intriguing, yet often overlooked. Detail about Catherine's personality is her deep interest in astrology and the occult. She regularly consulted astrologers and seers, often seeking their guidance on political decisions and the fate of her children. This blend of shrewd political pragmatism with a belief in mystical forces adds another layer of complexity to her character, hinting at the depths of her fears and anxieties in a constantly uncertain world. Where she sought any advantage she could find. Catherine de' Medici dies in 1589, just months before her last surviving son. Henry III is assassinated, bringing an end to the Valois dynasty. Her political legacy is profoundly complex. She stabilized the French monarchy during a period of intense religious civil war, ensuring the survival of her son's reigns. But she did so through methods that were often brutal, cynical, and morally reprehensible. She ruled with an iron will, a sharp intellect, and a ruthless understanding of power. Much like her Medici ancestors, but applied to a far grander, more violent stage. The disturbing truth of Catherine de' Medici's political power and her reign is a chilling testament to the lengths to which a ruler will go to preserve power in a desperate age. Her Florentine cunning, combined with the extreme religious passions of France, created a potent, often terrifying, blend of political intrigue and mass violence. She embodies the ultimate means justify the ends philosophy, leaving behind a legacy of both royal survival and unimaginable bloodshed. A stark reminder of the dark side of ambition. You now return to Florence, where a different branch of the Medici family is solidifying its grip on Tuscany, moving beyond the unofficial rule of the early Medici to establish a formal hereditary dukedom. This is the era of Cosimo de' Medici, a figure who, though perhaps less known than Lorenzo the Magnificent or Catherine de' Medici, wields political power with a cold, calculated efficiency that fundamentally transforms the Florentine state. You feel the atmosphere of a city transitioning from a proud, albeit often manipulated, republic to a true principality, controlled by a single, formidable family. This is the disturbing truth of how the Medici finally shed all pretense of republicanism and became undisputed monarchs. Cosimo I's path to power is itself a testament to the Medici's resilience and their astonishing political acumen. After the assassination of the first Duke of Florence, Alessandro de' Medici, an illegitimate son of Pope Clement VII. Remember, in 1537 the male line of the senior branch of the Medici seemed to be extinguished. You observe the Florentine Republican factions seizing this opportunity, hoping to restore the Republic and finally throw off Medici control. However, a young man from a minor, often overlooked, branch of the family steps forward, Cosimo di Giovanni de' Medici. He is a distant cousin, just 17 years old, but with an unexpected shrewdness, ambition, and a chilling determination. You see him initially chosen by the city's oligarchs, who believe he will be an easily manipulated figurehead, a docile puppet. They are gravely mistaken. Cosimo Lassai immediately asserts his independence and a ruthless grip on power. You witness his swift and brutal suppression of the Florentine exiles, the Fuoriusciti, who attempt to invade Florence and restore the Republic shortly after his accession. At the Battle of Montemurlo in 1537, Cosimo's forces decisively crushed the Republican forces, demonstrating a formidable military capability he had cultivated in secret. You feel the brutal finality of this victory. It spells the end of any serious Republican challenge to Medici rule. The captured Republican leaders are summarily executed, a stark message that any opposition will be met with overwhelming force. This is a disturbing truth about his rise a young ruler, swiftly and brutally consolidating power through military might and a chilling disregard for the lives of his political opponents. It's like a quiet, unassuming player in a card game suddenly revealing a full house and taking all the chips, then violently ensuring no one ever questions the hand, with internal opposition crushed. Cosimo the Wise systematically sets about transforming Florence into a centralized, authoritarian state. You observe his meticulous reorganization of the Florentine government, stripping away the last vestiges of republican institutions and replacing them with loyal bureaucrats answerable only to him. He creates a new, highly efficient, and ruthless secret police force to monitor his subjects and suppress any dissent. You feel the pervasive atmosphere of surveillance and fear that descends upon Florence. Whispers of discontent are quickly reported, and dissenters are swiftly imprisoned, tortured, or eliminated. This creates a state where absolute obedience is paramount, and independent thought is dangerous. He meticulously builds a vast network of spies and informants, ensuring he knows everything happening within his domain, both publicly and privately. Cosimo's ambition isn't limited to Florence. He aims to control all of Tuscany. You witness his relentless military campaigns and astute diplomatic maneuvers to absorb neighboring cities and territories into his dominion. His greatest triumph comes in 1555 with the conquest of Siena, a long-standing rival republic. The siege of Siena is prolonged and brutal, marked by immense suffering from starvation and disease. You feel the desperation of the Sienese and the uncompromising will of Cosimo to achieve his goal. His victory brings all of Tuscany under Medici control, solidifying a regional state under his absolute authority. This expansion culminates in 1569 when Pope Pius V bestows upon him the title of Grand Duke of Tuscany. You see Cosimo I once an obscure cousin, now formally recognized as a hereditary sovereign by the highest spiritual authority, elevating the Medici from powerful bankers and unofficial rulers to crowned heads of state. This is a profound moment for the family, a validation of generations of ambition and ruthless strategizing. He no longer hides behind the illusion of a republic. He rules openly as a duke, a stark contrast to his early ancestors like Cosimo the Elder, who preferred to pull strings from the shadows. The disturbing truth of Cosimo I's political power, despite its eventual stability and grandeur, lies in the complete and utter suppression of Florentine liberty. He transformed a vibrant, if turbulent, republic into a well-ordered but autocratic duchy. The flourishing intellectual freedom that characterized the early Renaissance under Lorenzo the Magnificent is replaced by a more stifling atmosphere, where art and culture primarily serve to glorify the ruling dynasty and express the power of the state. While he brings peace and prosperity, he does so at the cost of the very republican ideals that Florence once prided itself upon. It's like paving over a beautiful, wild garden with marble, making it grand and orderly, but ultimately killing its vibrant, free essence. Cosimo Iii is also a significant patron of the arts, but his patronage serves a different political purpose than that of his ancestors. You observe him commissioning grand public works that emphasize his own authority and the power of the Medici state. He completes the Uffizi Palace initially built as administrative offices for his centralized bureaucracy. Later becoming a renowned art gallery, builds the stunning Pitti Palace, and creates the magnificent Boboli Gardens. These architectural marvels are designed to awe and impress, solidifying the image of a powerful, legitimate dynasty and showcasing his absolute control. You see the famous statue of Perseus by Benvenuto Cellini in the Piazza della Signoria, a direct symbol of Cosimo's triumph over his enemies, particularly those who dared to challenge his rule. An intriguing, yet dark detail about Cosimo Iii is his meticulous attention to state finance and military organization, recognizing that true political power required a strong treasury and a disciplined army. He reformed the tax system, eliminated corruption except his own, and invested heavily in a standing army loyal only to him. He was a master of logistics and military engineering, personally overseeing the construction of new fortifications across Tuscany. This pragmatic approach to power, rooted in the harsh realities of constant threat, reveals a man constantly prepared for conflict, ensuring his absolute authority was backed by overwhelming force. His personal life is also marked by tragedy and scandal, with the early deaths of several of his children, fueling rumors of poison and intrigue within the family itself. While he produced a large family, some of their individual fates were tragic, adding a personal layer of sadness to his otherwise formidable and often chilling reign. Historians still debate the extent of Cosimo the First's personal ruthlessness, weighing his undeniable achievements in state building against the absolute power he wielded and the systematic suppression of freedoms he enacted. By the time of his death in 1574, Cosimo I leaves a firmly established, prosperous Grand Duchy of Tuscany under Medici rule. He succeeded where his more illustrious predecessors had failed or fallen short. He transformed the de facto power of the Medici into a fully recognized hereditary monarchy. The disturbing truth of his political power is less about individual acts of dramatic villainy and more about the systematic, cold-blooded suppression of liberty and the complete centralization of authority, ensuring the family's survival for generations to come, but fundamentally changing the nature of Florence forever. He built a stable state, but it was a stability enforced by an iron fist, pervasive surveillance, and the complete subjugation of republican ideals. You now delve into the darkest, most unsettling aspects of the Medici dynasty's political power, moving beyond their public triumphs to uncover the pervasive role of poison, plots, and fraught successions that plagued the family from within. Even at the height of their influence, the Medici were not immune to the insidious forces of jealousy, ambition, and the casual brutality that often characterized Renaissance court life. You feel the chilling paranoia that must have permeated their opulent palaces. The understanding that a misplaced word, a sudden illness, or a shift in loyalty could spell doom, even for members of the ruling family. This is the disturbing truth of power. Where even blood relations became potential enemies, the relentless pursuit of political power and the immense wealth of the Medici created a fertile ground for intense internal strife. You observe the constant jockeying for position among family members, brothers, cousins, and even in-laws, all vying for influence, prestigious appointments, and control over the vast Medici fortune and the Grand Ducal throne, while seemingly united to outsiders. The family was often a viper's nest of suspicion and backstabbing, a disturbing secret carefully hidden behind their public facade of unity and cultural patronage. It's like watching a real-life soap opera where the stakes are entire duchies, and the dramatic twists often end in literal death. One of the most chilling aspects of Medici internal conflicts involves the frequent rumors and suspicions of poison in an era before advanced forensic science. Poison was a common and terrifying tool for eliminating rivals or inconvenient family members. Sudden, unexplained deaths within powerful families were often attributed to poison, even if the true cause was illness. You hear the whispers, the chilling tales of a particularly potent aqua tofana or canarella, a poison notoriously associated with the Borgias. Remember them, a silent killer that left no trace. While concrete proof is often elusive due to the passage of time and the deliberate destruction of evidence, the pervasive belief that the Medici used poison was a powerful political weapon in itself, sowing fear and intimidating potential enemies into submission. Even within their own ranks, you feel the anxiety that must have come with every shared meal, every offered drink, wondering if it held a hidden, deadly ingredient, a notable and genuinely tragic example of these internal struggles involves the family of Cosimo I, the first Grand Duke of Tuscany. You recall his formidable reign that solidified Medici political rule? However, His personal life was marred by sudden deaths that fueled dark rumors and suspicions within his own court. You witnessed the early demise of several of his children, his sons, Francesco and Ferdinando. Later, Grand Dukes themselves lived under the shadow of suspicion regarding the deaths of their younger siblings. A particularly disturbing case involves the deaths of two of Cosimo I's younger children, Garzia and Giovanni, in 1562. They died within days of each other, allegedly from malaria, contracted while traveling. However, persistent rumors at the time suggested that Garzia, in a fit of rage or jealousy, had murdered Giovanni, and Cosimo, in a fit of paternal fury, then murdered Garzia. You feel the horror of such a scenario, the unthinkable brutality within a family, a true example of fratricide and filicide. While this remains unproven and largely considered a myth by modern historians, medical evidence points to malaria as the likely cause, and the rapidity of their deaths makes a murder-suicide by an angered father less plausible. The very fact that such a horrifying story could gain traction highlights the public's perception of the Medici's ruthless character and the constant threat of violence. Both overt and hidden. Within their inner circle, historians still debate the true circumstances of Garzia and Giovanni's deaths, with insufficient definitive evidence to confirm or deny the murder-suicide theory. Leaving it as a lingering dark stain on the family's history, another major source of disturbing truth and internal strife stemmed from succession crises, despite their efforts to produce male heirs and establish clear lines of descent. The Medici often faced precarious successions due to early deaths, infertility, or assassination. You observe the frantic maneuvering, the desperate attempts to ensure a legitimate line of descent. Marriages were arranged not for love, but for dynastic security and political advantage, often leading to unhappy unions and further intrigue. As ambitious family members jostled for position, the succession from Francesco Fermi Cosimo their son to his younger brother Ferdinando Fermin in 1587 is also shrouded in suspicion. Francesco's death, along with that of his second wife, Bianca Capello, occurred suddenly and concurrently. While official reports cited natural causes, rumors of poisoning immediately circulated, with many suspecting Ferdinando, who had renounced his cardinalate to take up the ducal title, of having orchestrated their deaths to clear his path to power. You feel the chilling suggestion that even fraternal bonds could be severed for the sake of the Grand Ducal throne. Again, definitive proof is lacking, but the dark whispers linger, illustrating the moral ambiguity and casual ruthlessness of the era's power struggles, where even family could not be trusted. The private lives of the later Medici Grand Dukes often became sources of political vulnerability and public scandal, further revealing the internal dynamics. You witness the opulence, the decadence, and sometimes the depravity that characterized their court. While their patronage of the arts continued, so too did a certain moral decline, as the absolute power they wielded led to excess and a weakening of the ethical boundaries. You see the elaborate festivities, the lavish banquets, and the sometimes scandalous romantic entanglements that became the talk of Florence and beyond, hinting at the unchecked power within the family, and intriguing, yet horrifying. Detail of Medici family life was the practice of arranging marriages for their daughters into the most powerful royal houses of Europe, such as the French and later the Austrian Habsburgs. While this brought immense political prestige and influence, it also meant sending young women, often unprepared, into entirely foreign and treacherous courts. You recall Catherine de' Medici's struggles in France? Other Medici princesses also faced difficult marriages, intense political intrigues, and cultural alienation, often becoming pawns in grander European power games, their personal happiness sacrificed for dynastic political advantage. The later Medici Grand Dukes, while not as historically prominent as their earlier counterparts, continued to face internal challenges. You observe the constant need to manage the powerful Florentine nobility, ensuring their loyalty through patronage and, if necessary, intimidation. The chilling lessons of the Pazzi conspiracy and the Republican revolts were never forgotten, leading to a pervasive atmosphere of vigilance and suspicion within the ducal court, ensuring that dissent was always monitored, even from within the family, from the disturbing truth of poison, plots, and fraught successions within the Medici family reveals a terrifying paradox. The very political power they so assiduously cultivated also became a source of internal corruption and self-destruction. Their rise to unparalleled influence was built on ruthless ambition, and that ruthlessness often turned inward, consuming even their own. The desire for absolute power, combined with the often unclear rules of succession, created an environment where family members became potential rivals, and loyalty was often secondary to personal gain. This internal bleeding slowly, insidiously, sapped the strength of the dynasty. As you conclude this glimpse into their internal strife, you sense the slow, insidious decay that begins to set in. The later generations of Medici, though maintaining their grand ducal titles, often lacked the brilliance, the cunning, and the sheer force of will that characterized their ancestors. This internal weakening, coupled with shifting European power dynamics, will eventually lead to the slow, undramatic decline of the once mighty Medici dynasty, leaving behind a legacy of both breathtaking achievement and horrifying moral compromise. A chilling testament to the internal cost of their immense political power, you now arrive at the final, melancholic chapter of the Medici saga, witnessing the slow, almost imperceptible decline and eventual extinction of the once mighty dynasty. After centuries of astonishing ascent, marked by unparalleled political power, cultural flourishing, and horrifying internal struggles, the Medici family's influence wanes, leaving behind a complex and enduring shadow on the world. You feel a sense of quiet closure, a gentle fading of a once vibrant, yet often disturbing, light. This is the disturbing truth of how even the most formidable political power can ultimately succumb to its own internal weaknesses by the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The Medici Grand Dukes of Tuscany are a far cry from their dynamic, audacious ancestors. You observe the reigns of figures like Cosimo III de' Medici, 1670-1793, characterized by increasing religious conservatism, fiscal mismanagement, and a general lack of the political acumen that defined earlier generations. The Grand Duchy of Tuscany, once a shining beacon of the Renaissance, becomes a stagnant, increasingly irrelevant state on the European stage. You feel the slow decay, the sense that the family has lost its spark, its drive, and its ruthless edge for political power. It's like watching a once vibrant fire slowly dwindle to embers, casting only weak shadows. The most pressing issue, and the ultimate cause of their extinction, is the perennial problem of succession, despite concerted efforts. The later Medici Grand Dukes failed to produce viable male heirs who lived to inherit the throne. You witnessed the frantic attempts to secure the line, including difficult marriages and the desperate hope for a child who would carry on the family name and title. This repeated failure stands in stark contrast to the relentless pursuit of heirs that drove earlier European dynasties. It's as if destiny, after so many twists and turns, finally decided the Medici's time was simply coming to an end. Despite all their political machinations, the European powers, sensing the impending void, begin to eye Tuscany with a keen interest. You observe the complex diplomatic maneuvers and secret treaties among the major powers, Austria, France, Spain, as they quietly carve up the future of the Grand Duchy. Long before the last Medici draws breath, the fate of Tuscany is decided in distant European capitals, without any real input from the ailing Medici themselves. You feel the indignity of this, a once powerful political family reduced to a pawn in a grander geopolitical game. No longer able to exert their will on the international stage. The last male Medici Grand Duke is Giangastone de' Medici, 1723-1737. You see him as a melancholic, reclusive figure, often described as dissolute, who cares little for the affairs of state. He is childless, and his reign is largely a period of quiet resignation as the end of his family's rule approaches. The glory days of political dominance, artistic ambition, and ruthless power are long gone. You feel the profound sadness of a dynasty winding down, not with a bang, but with a weary sigh. Their political power having drained away, the disturbing truth of their final decline is not a single, dramatic event, but the insidious decay of their once innovative political spirit. The later Medici became increasingly insular, overly pious, and less engaged with the dynamic world that had brought their ancestors so much power. They lost the brutal cunning and adaptability that allowed Cosimo the Elder and Lorenzo the Magnificent to thrive politically. The very systems of patronage and control that secured their political power in earlier centuries became rigid and stifling, leading to economic stagnation and intellectual decline in Florence. It's like watching a once athletic family slowly become sedentary, losing the very muscle that defined them, both literally and politically. The final act of their dynasty comes with the death of Giangastone in 1737. With no direct male heir, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany passes, not to a Medici, but to Francis Stephen of Lorraine, husband of the future Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. As part of a complex European power-sharing agreement, you witness the end of an era. As Florence and Tuscany fall under foreign rule for the first time in centuries, the Medici family's direct male line is officially extinguished, and their political control over Florence ends. However, the story of the Medici doesn't entirely vanish with Giangastone. You learn about his sister, Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, the last direct lineal descendant of the Medici Grand Dukes, a shrewd and culturally astute woman. She understands the immense historical and artistic legacy of her family. In a remarkable act of foresight and patriotism, she signs the family pact in 1737, a legal agreement with the new House of Lorraine. This pact stipulates that all the vast Medici art collections, libraries, palaces, and scientific instruments, accumulated over centuries, would remain in Florence, becoming the property of the Tuscan state forever, never to be removed from the city. You feel the profound significance of this act. It ensures that the cultural treasures of the Renaissance, largely funded by the Medici and central to their political image, would remain Florence's enduring gift to the world, even as her family's direct political power ceased. This is a quiet, yet powerful, legacy of cultural preservation. The Medici's enduring shadow extends far beyond their direct rule. You reflect on their immense and complex impact on history. They were the architects of the Renaissance, funding the genius of artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael, and fostering a cultural explosion that reshaped Western civilization. Their banking innovations laid the groundwork for modern finance. Their strategic marriages placed Medici women on the thrones of France and other powerful nations, subtly influencing European politics for generations. You see their lasting presence in the magnificent palaces and churches of Florence, each building a testament to their wealth, ambition, and sometimes their ruthlessness. The disturbing truth of the Medici family's political power remains. Their story is one of unprecedented political ascent from humble banking origins, achieved through cunning manipulation, ruthless pragmatism, and a willingness to leverage every tool at their disposal, including the church. They redefined what it meant to rule, proving that wealth and subtle influence could be as powerful as any army or ancient title. But their very methods, which secured their power, also contained the seeds of their own eventual decline. As the external world evolved beyond their control, and internal weaknesses began to fester, The Medici were a family of paradoxes, ruthless yet enlightened, pious yet corrupt, ambitious yet ultimately human. Their disturbing truth serves not just as a historical anecdote, but as a stark reminder of the intense power struggles, the moral complexities, and the often brutal realities that underpinned the magnificent flourish of the European Renaissance. The golden age they helped create was indeed dazzling, but it was often forged in shadows and secured with an iron fist, leaving a profound and unsettling mark on the history of political power. The whispers of Florentine grandeur and chilling political intrigue now gently recede, the scent of Renaissance ambition fading into the quiet hum of the fan. You drift away from the opulent palaces and the shadow of their subtle control, leaving the Medici to their complex legacy. Their triumphs and their troubling truths finally settled into the annals of history. The compelling, often terrifying, tale of their political power concludes, allowing you to settle into the peaceful depths of slumber. All the manipulation, all the magnificence, all the moral ambiguity now melts into the quiet night,